Good to have you here. This is Unintended Consequences, episode 59 for July 15th, 2026. We're looking at a case today where the people involved were doing their best with the information they had. In the summer of 1935, crews from the newly formed Soil Conservation Service handed out bundles of kudzu seedlings to farmers in Alabama and Georgia. Each plant came with instructions to set roots along gullied hillsides, placing the crowns at intervals that would let the vines knit together across bare slopes. Within a decade, the same vine was threading through fence rows and climbing power poles faster than crews could cut it back. The solution had been released into a landscape that offered almost no natural check on its growth, because nothing in the local mix of insects, mammals, or seasonal fires had evolved to keep pace with it. The Dust Bowl years had exposed the South's long-standing erosion problem in dramatic fashion. Heavy rains on cleared cotton land carved deep gullies that swallowed fields and roads, sometimes overnight after a single thunderstorm. The federal government, through the Soil Conservation Service, established in 1935, sought living ground covers that could hold soil on slopes where terraces alone were failing. Kudzu, a leguminous vine native to Japan and parts of China, had already demonstrated rapid coverage and nitrogen-fixing ability in earlier agricultural trials. Agronomists noted its tolerance for poor soils and its capacity to produce up to a foot of new growth per day during the growing season, which meant a single rooted crown could blanket several square yards before the first frost. At a moment when millions of acres needed stabilization and jobs programs required quick, visible work, the vine appeared to be an efficient, self-replicating tool. Officials therefore treated it as a public works asset rather than an exotic import requiring long-term scrutiny. Between 1935 and 1945, the Soil Conservation Service distributed roughly 85 million kudzu seedlings and rooted crowns. If each crown covered even a modest fraction of an acre once established, the arithmetic pointed to hundreds of thousands of acres brought under some form of living cover within that single decade. The plantings occurred primarily across the Piedmont and coastal plain states. The Civilian Conservation Corps planted additional stands along highways and on demonstration farms, spacing the crowns so that runners could meet and form a continuous mat. Early reports from county agents praised the plant's performance. A 1942 bulletin from the service described kudzu fields that had reduced sediment loss by more than 90% on test plots in Mississippi, a figure measured by comparing runoff from treated slopes against untreated ones during the same rain events. Channing Cope, a Georgia newspaperman and founder of the Kudzu Club of America, organized county chapters that promoted the vine as the miracle plant. He claimed more than 20,000 members by 1943. State fairs awarded ribbons for the fastest growing stands, turning the vine into a visible measure of progress that local communities could point to at harvest time. Few published warnings circulated at the time. The handful of botanists who noted the vine's aggressive habit in Japan were not consulted by the planting programs, so the decision to scale up rested on performance data gathered only inside the United States. Once established, kudzu's growth rate and climbing habit allowed it to overtop and shade out native trees and shrubs within 2 or 3 seasons. On slopes where erosion control had succeeded, the same dense canopy prevented understory regeneration and altered local hydrology by intercepting rainfall before it reached the soil. Power companies in Georgia and Alabama began budgeting for annual vine removal after lines sagged under the weight of foliage and winter-killed stems. Railroads recorded delays when kudzu mats covered tracks and switches, because the stems remained stiff enough after frost to foul mechanical equipment. By the late 1950s, some landowners found entire woodlots reduced to vine-covered skeletons. This eliminated timber value and wildlife habitat that had existed before planting, because the canopy blocked sunlight from reaching seedlings of pine or hardwood that would otherwise have replaced older trees. The causal chain was straightforward. A species selected for rapid vegetative spread received continued protection from grazing and fire for decades. Its lack of co-evolved herbivores in North America removed the pressure that limited it in Asia, where insects and mammals had kept the vine from forming unbroken blankets. Second order effects included increased herbicide use along rights of way and the gradual shift of rural aesthetics from open woodland to uniform green mats. Third order effects appeared when property values in heavily infested counties declined. Local governments faced ongoing maintenance costs that the original erosion control budgets had never anticipated, because those budgets measured only the first year reduction in sediment, not the decades of follow up work. The Department of Agriculture listed kudzu as a common weed in 1970 and as a noxious weed in 1997. This ended federal promotion and restricted interstate movement of planting material. Mechanical and chemical control programs expanded, yet complete eradication proved impractical on established stands because root crowns can remain viable for years, sending new shoots even after the visible vines are cut or sprayed. Recent surveys using satellite imagery and ground sampling suggest that dense, landscape-dominating patches cover far less acreage than the popular image of the vine that ate the South implies. Perhaps 227,000 acres of heavy infestation exist across the region. Lighter scattered populations are more widespread, showing up along roadsides and field edges where the original plantings once served a narrow purpose. Researchers now distinguish between the plant's original utility on steep, actively eroding sites and its persistence as a management burden elsewhere. No large-scale reversal program has been attempted. Current approaches emphasize containment and the restoration of competitive native vegetation that can hold its own once the vine is kept in check. Self-replicating biological tools reward planners who model not only first-year performance but also the absence of natural controls over decades. Incentive structures that pay for initial coverage without later accountability tend to favor species whose growth continues after the original problem is solved. When introducing any living system at landscape scale, the relevant comparison is not the degraded state it replaces, but the range of stable states it might create or foreclose. The kudzu episode therefore prompts a standing question for today's restoration and climate projects. What mechanisms will remain in place to limit or redirect an intervention once its early benefits are achieved? We'll leave it there for today. Thanks for thinking through this one with me. If you know someone who loves a good cautionary tale, send it their way, and I'll see you tomorrow with another. And if you'd rather watch than listen, find us on YouTube at NARA Network. Links in the show notes. And before you go, this show is part of the NARA Network, a family of daily podcasts on tech, science, and markets, each one a short, sharp briefing you can finish on the commute. If today earned its place in your feed, here's your next listen: Environmental Intelligence, the Environment and Climate Policy Brief for Canada. Find every show free at naranetwork.com. Live dashboards, TSLA, SpaceX launches, the investing scoreboard are all at naranetwork.com/data. This episode used AI voice synthesis of my voice. Editorial selection and analysis are my own.